So anyway, my name is Walter Porter. My Tlingit name is Tlingit, and I'm from Yakutat, Alaska. Originally from Copper River. About 500 or 600 years ago, our people moved down to Icy Bay, and then to Night Island, and then down into the Yakutat area. And we call ourselves Kushkakwan. Here comes some Kushkakwan people right here. And before we were Kushkakwan, we were Ganeshkwan, meaning Copper River people. There's many stories that I could tell you about it, but I'm going to just do a short little one to start out. One time before our people moved down here, an individual was ostracized from the community. And when you get ostracized from a community in the old days, it was because you destabilized the community. And one of the things we can do now, you couldn't do in those days, is gossip, cause havoc in the community. And that was worse than murder, believe it or not, to destabilize the community. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why we get ostracized. This individual was cast out in the wilderness, and his mom went with him off in a distance. She couldn't be with him, but she watched out over him in a distance. And one day he finds an eagle with a broken wing. And he takes the eagle in and he feeds it. And the eagle gets well one day and up and flies away. And the day he flew away, he started having dreams. And this eagle would come to him and his dream, and he would stand on the ashes of his fire. And he thought, what a strange dream. He had this dream every night. And finally one night when the fire went out, he was looking at the ashes there, and he noticed something green in the ashes. And he took a stick and he stirred the ashes around and saw these little green flat things, and he could tell that the fire was melting the rock. And he took that rock and he took another stone, he put it on another rock, and he started beating on it. And he could shape it. Then he got more and more and more of it. What was it? It was copper. And his mother saw what he was doing, went back to the tribe and told him that he had discovered a very valuable thing. And they led him back into the village. And today we know our people as Copper River people. And if some of you know the history, many people who were involved with the Copper River people became very rich. The first of them, Chilkoot. There was a Chilkoot chief that went to Prince William Sound, was one of the first chiefs to be familiar with the copper tana pieces that they made. And he became very, very wealthy. And he had 3 wives when he lived in Icy Bay with them. And one of the wives went to Night Island. That's after the glacier, Hubbard Glacier, came off it, and it was just all a big strawberry patch. And she got caught there by the people that lived there. And some of those people are here today from Atlan. And I won't be able to tell all the details of the story. But one thing after another happened, and one of the chief's sons got caught fishing on Hempback Creek. And they sent him home after they busted up his canoe. So the chief sent down 9 large pieces of copper. And those people say, this is way too much for that crime, but we'll accept it, and we give you all this country. So that's how the Kushkakwan, Ganeshkwan, received the Yakutat area, down as far as Sitak. Then Dekwedi owned the rest of it, down towards Dry Bay and the Tlingit, and Dry Bay and Latulia Bay. But anyway, all of us have wonderful stories to tell about our people, and I thought I'd just share that one with you because it's such a dear story to our people. So anyway, I'm just delighted to be here, and I can totally understand if you start snoozing while I'm talking. It's not my talking, it's that good food they gave you over there at A&B Hall. It's just talking. Yeah. Anyway, I ate so much there, I feel like this is a good time to take a nap. But if any of you take a nap, I won't be offended by it, because so much food. God, they put... Andy and I were commenting on it. We had 2 stories of food on our plate. I'm just pleased to be at the conference. I want to tell you that the last conference in Sitka, if you missed it, as you've been told, and I'll tell it to you again, you can buy the discs out there. And if you want anybody's specific presentation, you can buy the disc for $12.50. And I believe it's KATH, this young fellow right here, could give you their phone number if you wanted to purchase any of that material. And again, like I said, we're filming the whole conference, so please be free to check on it. And if you want somebody's specific presentation, you can purchase that easily. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take us to process it, probably several months when all of it's done. It won't happen overnight. But anyway, I've noticed this conference is a wonderful conference like the last one. A lot of clan issues are coming up, clan naming. I watched Anna Katsik and Ida from inland communities, Tlingit communities, and Harold Jacobs talk about clan naming. And a lot of us have a feeling that we're losing everything. And it's a real hard feeling, and it's a very sensitive issue. We don't want to lose everything. Even our elders told us that we're going to lose our language, we're going to lose our culture, the way we lived. And so it's a fear that I want to let you know it's not necessary to feel that way. Interestingly enough, our people, our ancient elders, were very intelligent and they're very spiritual. They know how to deal with the spirit world. They know how to get information for them. And what they did a long time ago is they heard certain information and they put it down in what we call today legends or mythologies. And as you know, if some of you are watching the History Channel, one of the code words nowadays is decoding. The people that study history are decoding history. They decode everything they find. As you know, some of you know, the Mayan calendar, which is a very important find in Central America, the date of it ends December 21st, 2012. It's just right around the corner. And we'll see a lot of changes between now and then. And if you are doing reading and looking at the history channels and the learning channels, there's a lot happening in the world. And one of the most dramatic things that are happening in the world, and the pace is picking up, is we're separating each other from each other. Very serious thing. And it's happening at a rapid pace. If you watch news and look what's happening in the news, how people are speaking to one another, how they're treating one another, it's as if none of them believe that they're part of creation. And in our ancestry, we knew we were a part of creation, and all cultures knew we were a part of creation. But it seems, if we watch the main things that are going on in the world today, people are acting like they're not people anymore. Human beings. All our names of our tribes mean human beings. Sometimes we forget that. We think we're Tlingits, we think we're Inupiaq, we think we're Germans, we think we're Iranians, but really, we're human beings. Humans, when we look at each other, we're all humans here. But beings is a different thing. Human beings. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven's within. That's what he's talking about. Is it different? If the kingdom of heaven's in you and in me, is it a different thing? No, it's not different. That's why he says, to the least of these, what you do to them, you do unto the Father. He tries to remind us that we're all of one spirit. When the pilgrims first come to Plymouth Rock, They had a very interesting experience. When they got off the boat there and the native people were helping them over on the East Coast, they started hearing these strange stories. And one of the strange stories was Hiawatha. Now, we put Hiawatha stories into children's books, but they really should be our books. They should be us learning from them. Hiawatha said, the trees are our brothers. The fish are our brothers. All the animals in the world are our brothers. And the earth, that's our mother. The earth provides everything for us. How strange these native people were to those pilgrims. Several hundred years ago, a wise man was born to Poland or Russia. His name was Einstein. Einstein did an amazing thing with his gifts. He broke down the cells and everything and the elements of everything, and he looked inside an atom, and he discovered there's three things: electrons, photons, what's the other one? What? Neutrons. I apologize. But anyway, they were spinning a circle inside. Everything he looked at had the same thing. Then he made a great announcement. All things are, there's another word, starts with an R, relative. And our people, when they heard that, they said, you're right, we're all related. Even though I try to make that comical, and it is in a way, it shows us, in fact, that everything in the world is symbolic of how it really is. And when we realize that, other prophets start to make sense too. We start to look at Jesus a little bit differently. Baha'u'llah of the Baha'i faith said, science and spirituality are one and the same. And we're starting to realize that what Jesus said really was science. A lot of us are religious, but when we look at it, he was telling us about the science of the mind and the science of the creation, science of the universe. Amazing stuff. But anyway, I wanted to get back to this idea that we're losing stuff. When we start to look at these stories, we realize that we're not going to lose any of it. Our culture is going to come back because you and I are going to ask for it to come back. Jesus wasn't kidding when he said, ask and ye shall receive. He wasn't lying. It's a formula. Asking equals receiving. In Matthew 12, verse 21 or something like that, Lonnie Hodge gave it to me, and I'm not a biblical expert, even though I'm fascinated by parts of the Bible. Jesus said, what do you pray for, or what you ask and pray for, and you believe, you receive. That really is a formula. That really is science. If that goes on in our minds, guess what happens? We get what we receive. If we want our culture back and our clan systems back, if we ask for it, we're going to get it back. If we want all our art and the way our people were, if we want laughter and joy in the halls again, like it was when you guys and we were young, when I would go to meetings when I was just a little boy, I can remember going with my mother, and it would last for days, those potlatches. But everybody had a lot of fun. Everybody enjoyed themselves. The interaction between clans was nothing but love. Have any of you read Richard and Nora Downhauer's book, where Jesse Dalton talks about the two opposite clan member, and she says, my love for you is like the making of driftwood. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen and ever heard. My love for you is like the making of driftwood. And you'll see, that's just a short little story, but when you ask your elders, that sort of thing was going on all the time. All the time. And how about genealogy? You know, we did genealogy. I know some of you can remember. When they sit us down as little kids, they spent hours telling us who we're related to, and who's this clan, and who's that clan. For hours we would listen to that. You know why that was done? Not so we could write it down and put it on a shelf. It was done so you and I could bond with the community. So you who are my age and older and experience the community, the reason why everybody showed up at the hall when there was a meeting, because they all went through that bonding. It was a beautiful experience. Now, how many show up for a meeting now? Not many. And then we don't have the guiding and leadership, so many times we fight because we don't have elders telling us that that's the wrong thing to do. We think we're so smart, we use our intelligence to disrupt everything, and you know what the kids go? They go, if this is culture, I don't want any part of it. And so they don't come up and we say, how come the kids are not here? How come the young people are not here? They really don't want to be a part of fighting. But our real problem is the cycle of eldership is broken. The cycle of eldership is broken. And all those beautiful things we heard this morning in the sessions about the clan naming and all that, a lot of that's being lost. But I'm here to tell you today that we have stories that will tell us how to get that back. Now, how many of you were at my presentation in Sitka 2 years ago? 3. Look at there. I must have had some education. I can actually count. At the ball game the other day, Yakutat lost, and they were having a hard time, but we were paying attention to the score. Haynes was ahead, and we were really concerned. It was 4-2. See, I can count. So anyway, I'm going to show this video. See, Alaska put it together. I've worked with elders, and I was surprised when it came together and was finished. And they invited me to edit it, or edit the document before it was filmed. Excuse me, I did that. And then one day, the production came out. None of my work was in there. And I said, geez, I did all that work changing everything. How come none of it was in there? And they said, oh, we forgot to tell you that we filmed before we gave you the document. So they couldn't change the film. So I nothing could be put in there. And I have a comical thing. I used to brag to people about that I did part of the editing to this Box of Daylight production. And they go, oh, what did you put in there? And I say, I put in the snoring. If you see it there, it's there, you know. How can they say, no, you couldn't have did that? How can you write that into it? So anyway, I have fun with that part of it. Anyway, this particular story shows us how to access the universe of wisdom and knowledge. It's accessible. And you'll start to see, you'll take a new view of who Jesus was, and who Raven was, who Muhammad was, who Coyote was. You'll start to see that, in fact, these individuals were the same spirit. And they're leaders. And the other thing that it'll show you is that we're going to the same place they're going. It can't be any other way. We're all going home, and it's impossible not to go home. That's what we're here on earth. Jesus says heaven can be achieved on earth. And I'll change that just a little bit. Heaven will be achieved on earth. This is our place. A lot of us grew up in the 60s and 50s and the 60s. And our playground and our fun was down at the soda stand. We all went there to have fun, drink sodas and flirt with the girls and be big guys, tough guys, and once in a while wrestle around and get a black eye, those kind of things. All that happened at the soda stand. Our people, you know, our people didn't believe in death. We incarnated in and out of the universe. We didn't die. They almost touched on it this morning a little bit. But the children coming back, that's our elders that left us. Reincarnation, there's only one little bit of reincarnation left in the Bible. One day a person comes up to Jesus and he says, "Were you the prophet Ezekiel?" And Jesus corrected him. He said, "No, that was who? John the Baptist." That's actually in the Bible. That means there is reincarnation. Well, if you go back into history, you'll find that reincarnation was all over in the Bible for 400 years. Politics took it out after 400 years. Now, just that one little story. Somebody told me there's one other thing in the Bible that indicates that too, and I haven't seen it. So, when we say one of ours passes away, they're going to heaven, our people didn't believe that. They're going to go out, they're going to come back. And that's why when we name children, I'm not sure how it was in your community, but I watched Oscar sisters, Ruth Jackson, and people like that, when they come and see a child, they go, "Hello, Grandma, hello." Grab their hand, my grandma, because they give them that grandma's name, the one that left. So there's a lot to indicate that we were different. You know, the Western culture is the only culture that I know that doesn't believe in reincarnation. You can go to Africa, South America, all through the Eastern communities, and we all believe in reincarnation. So reincarnation, I had to apologize to that fellow that presented at lunch the other day. I thought that's what he was going to talk about. And I started giving all this information to him. The poor guy looked at me. I think he was getting dizzy listening to me because I was talking about something different. He was talking about the reincarnation of stories, right? And I thought he was talking about us reincarnated in another life. So I was embarrassed when I was eating lunch there, you know. I had to go apologize to the poor guy. So don't want to change a person too fast. So anyway, the other thing is, I wanted to tell you, keep your eye out for the many changes that are coming. Keep your eye out for information. We just had an individual come up from Mexico, Central Mexico. His name is Juan Antiega, and I hope to bring him here into the southeast area in the near future. He said that the Mayans have information several thousand years ago. When this time came, the end of the calendar, the last 4 years of the end of the calendar, information would start to be revealed to the public. And he's one of those people that's revealing. He refers to it as the veil of silence being lifted. And actually, we actually have that information. Now, how many of you heard of the Tlingit story called How the Loon Got Its Necklace? How many of you ever heard of that? Not many. Let me tell it to you in short. It's a very, I can give you a short version of it. An old man, blind old man, gets married to a young woman. And of course, she's not happy about that. He's not only blind, but he's real old. And they go out in the wilderness. He says, "Let's go moose hunting." And of course, he's not going to shoot the moose with his bow and arrows. She's got to do that. So she sits him down by the lake, by a tree, so he can rest up against it. And she's going to go get a moose. And what does she do? Never comes back. So there he is, blind, stuck next to the tree. And all of a sudden he hears a voice, and it's a loon's voice in the lake. And the loon asks him what his problem is, and he tells him about it, about how he's abandoned there. And the loon says, "I can help you." He says, "I'm going to take you down under the lake, get on my back 7 times. And he does this. Each time he comes up, his vision starts to return. And all of a sudden he has full vision. And that's how the story is. I'm not an old timer. I'm sure if an old timer tells that story, it would probably be several days long. But let me tell you where else the story is. It's in Revelation. It's about opening the 7 seals. Do you know what the ancient word Satan really means? It means thy brother's accuser. It's not a being, it's an idea. It means thy brother's accuser. And if you look at the 7 seals and read each one of them, the 4th one is the most interesting. it says, thy brother's accuser in us will be cast down. And then there's a famous picture of Jesus looking up like this, and he has his hand right here by his heart. That's where the fourth chakra. I don't know if we have names for it in Tlingit, but there's 7 parts of us. And I studied this in the East in my how the loon got its necklace. I could see the similarities between the stories. Now in the East, when we study this, there's 3 lower parts of us. One's called security, one's called sensation, and the other's called power. Now you think about it, we stay in those in all our thinking. And our mind spins and toils in those 3 different sections. We're either worried about money, worried about our wives running off with somebody, or else we're worried about food and sex. And then power comes in. If you threaten my area, try to take my woman, power there. We stay stuck in those 3 areas. Jesus says, look at the lily. It neither spins nor toils. What he's talking about is our mind spinning all the time. And when we learn how to forgive, and we learn how to control those 3 lower parts of us, there will come a time when the brother's accuser in us will be cast down. And we'll become strong again. And then it's just a matter of time on our journey home, where we won't be coming back to earth anymore. And I got sidetracked a little bit. How about that soda stand? When we understand reincarnation, that we're in and out of the universe, we actually come down to earth here to play around and to have fun. And that's our ego minds, not our spiritual minds. So anyway, let's show this video, and you'll see why it is that we'll recover all our culture when we want it. Some of you know the Modig family from Ketchikan. Doug Modig is in treatment, works with alcohol people. Amazing work that he does. Great big tall guy like me, and even bigger than me. But anyway, Doug said, you know why we don't learn our Tlingit language now? Because we don't want to. He says, anybody that wants to learn the Tlingit language, just go ahead and learn. Isn't that interesting? All of us who don't know are the ones who don't try. And if we just make up our minds and want to speak Tlingit, and we hear the story, this is what's so beautiful about this conference. We see young people that said, I'm going to learn the Tlingit language. Guess what? In a year or 2, they're speaking fluent Tlingit. And that's a lesson that I've got to learn. I've got to pay attention and sit down and learn the language. I'd love to do like what David Katzig does, and some of the others that here at the conference. When they say something, they say it in Tlingit, and it makes so much sense. It's so much beauty, so poetic, our language. It's just a wonderful experience. But anyway, keep this in mind. What do you want to do in your life? How do you want culture to come back? That's what we're all here for. That's what interests us when we say clan conference. We come here and listen to this story. And what I'm going to do afterwards, thanks to Charlie Joe, I think Ethel, where are you? I thought I saw Ethel come in here. Are you here, Ethel? Oh, there she is. Her father, as many of you know, is one of the most powerful recent old timers that lived in our centuries. If you get an opportunity to listen to some of his recordings, you know that you're listening to a real old timer. He was born in our country. He was born in Dry Bay, Kagwantan. But anyway, I was putting this together when I first got the script to do the Box of Daylight. I'm the host on the Box of Daylight. I'm sitting out at the airport, and Janet Fries and Eric Ekholm were on their way to pick me up so we could start the filming. And I'm reading this script, and I go, my God, I know what this is. I had no idea that it had a hidden meaning into it. And then I did the Box of Daylight tape, and then I spent several years putting this together, and it all fell together. One day, Nellie Lord walked up to me after hearing my presentation, handed me this document, and it was Charlie Joseph's version of the Box of Daylight. It all came together when I read that. I was just so blessed, so thankful that Charlie Joseph, even though he was gone, gave me a beautiful gift. And you'll see it today. What we'll do, we'll show the Box of Daylight video that's See Alaska, Alaska Museum, Humanities Forum, and Cluckwan Heritage sponsored. And we'll show it. Then I'm going to go through, I'm going to add Charlie's version of it in there. And then I would like you to help me interpret it, and you'll be amazed how you can decode these stories. I'll show you how simple it is. And how many, there's two words, there's mythology and there's myth, right? You know what myth means? It means, if I say, that's a myth, what am I saying? Untrue. You know why that word came up? When the anthropologists were wandering around the world undoing all these cultures, the Western culture, undoing all our cultures, the one thing they couldn't understand was our stories. You know why? They were trying to read it literally. But we're like Jesus. Jesus says, I am the door, I am the shepherd, I am the light, I am the way, I am the life. Now those are symbolic terms. He didn't look like a door to me. Wouldn't it be confusing if we tried to imagine him to be a door? So it's important for us to look at our own stories symbolically, and you'll see an amazing thing. Wonderful material comes out of there. And the other thing, and I won't get into it long, but if you are somewhat familiar with the Lucifer story, you'll know that it's the same story as the Raven loses his beak story. And it has a disguised portion in it. And it's just amazing that some other, maybe a little later here, we'll watch the time here, and we'll get into that a little bit. So anyway, we'll go ahead and show the story, and I want you to help me interpret it, and you'll see an amazing thing unfold, and you'll know that our ancestors took care of us when you see the message they're sending you. Our ancient ancestors are talking to you today. So let's go ahead and turn the light down, and we'll watch the video. Thank you.
When you look at these totem poles, chilkat blankets, and carved wooden hats, do you wonder? Who made these? What are they used for? What do they mean to the people who made them? To my people, the Tlingit natives of Alaska, they record the history of our families and tribes. They document our relationship with the land, with the fish, with the game that has sustained us throughout the ages. When we wear them and put them in our houses, they tell people who we are. What is our lineage? They give us self-respect. They are more like the coats of arms of the noble families of Britain than the sculptures of Picasso or Michelangelo. Take this raven hat that one of our great chiefs would wear at special ceremonies and dances. It tells a story of how Raven brought light into the world for the first time. This is a story my mother and grandmother have told me many times. Like the book of Genesis in the Bible, this hat records an important part of our history.
Raven looked around, and it was dark. There was no sun, no moon, no stars. That was the way it was back in those ancient days, when it was dark as the inside of the earth, dark as the wing of Raven himself. He had to grope his way along the beach until he came to the Nass River. He had learned from the fishermen of the night about an old man and about the bright treasures he kept in his house. So Raven groped his way up the banks of the river. He flew up the banks of the river. He ran and he danced all the way to the headwaters and the house of at.oow. He was wealthy, that old nobleman. He had many treasures, but the greatest ones he kept in boxes there in his house: the sun, the moon, and the stars. He had another treasure too, a beautiful daughter, one he loved very much. Raven learned all that from the fishermen of the night. He turned himself into a spruce needle. He floated down the river into a pool, floated there, and waited. The servants didn't notice him when they brought water into the house, and the daughter didn't notice him either when she dipped her ladle into that water and held it to her lips and drank. Didn't even notice Raven as she swallowed him down, and now he was inside her and she became pregnant. 9 months later, she gave birth to Raven in the form of a human child. That nobleman of the headwaters of the Nass, Nashak on Kau, he loved his little grandson, didn't care where he came from, didn't know who he was, just thought he was his grandson. He wouldn't deny him anything. And Raven, as that little boy, he looked around the house and he had figured out where the treasures were hidden. And so, when he was old enough, he asked to play with one of the boxes that was next to the house screen. His mother said no, but Raven cried and carried on so much that the old man gave in to him.
Ach, dat gaan de awek ja de wek hoek.
When no one was looking, Raven went to the box and opened it up. Out flew the stars, all the stars of the nighttime sky. Out they all flew, up out of the box, up through the smoke hole, up into the black sky, where they scattered and glimmered and have remained to this day. Nashak Ankau could hardly believe it, but the stars box was empty. The little boy pretended to be very sorry about what he'd done. He cried and wouldn't be comforted. Finally, to stop his crying, Nashak Ankau gave him the second box to play with, even though the boy's mother didn't think he should have it. Maybe she was thinking her old father spoiled her son too much, but he was trying to explain to her that he was a good boy, didn't mean to lose the stars. And Raven just crept up behind them when they were arguing like that. Softly and silently, like a feather rising on the wind, the moon rose out, up through the smoke hole. The old man tried to catch it, but he couldn't, nobody could. It didn't belong to anybody anymore. Now there was a moon in the nighttime sky, and people began to see what the world they lived in was like. The old man grieved over the loss of his treasures, but still he loved his little grandson, and he forgave him. He wouldn't let him near the biggest box, though. That was his final greatest treasure, box of daylight. So Raven waited. He waited until late one night. He put on his wing cape, turning himself back from a human child and into a black bird again. He rose up. All the people of the Nass, all the people of the night, all the people of the world were asleep. He crept to the box. He opened it slowly. A great light shone out. It rose, and it rose, up through the smoke hole, and the stars faded before it, and the moon, and daylight broke over the world. The people of the world woke up, and they marveled. They saw the first sunrise, and they saw the world they had been living in, truly saw what they had for the first time. And Nashak Ankau saw too. He saw Raven, recognized him for what he was, and he knew what had happened. He grieved for the loss of his treasures. He grieved even more for the loss of his grandson. But just then, a sunbeam came through the smoke hole, and it fell upon him, warmed him, and he looked around, and he saw clearly, and he understood.
I'll leave that picture up there for a minute. See that big circle on his head? You know, Tlingit carvers are very clever. If they couldn't carve something, they might change it around, but still so you could get the same message. Now when you take that circle up there and you put it flat and it's over here, what is it? It's an aura. So it's how special Raven really was. That's the aura. So the Tlingit couldn't carve it this way, so he moves it this way. So they were clever. Remember that one in Ketchikan with Abe Lincoln? He's got short little legs. You know why the carver did that? Because the picture he saw of Abe Lincoln cut off his legs. It wasn't in the picture. So he thought that's what Abe Lincoln looked like. So Tlingits are very clever at how they do things. You know, Jesus was a very strange man. You know, he said a lot of very strange things. And one of the things he said that probably puzzles a lot of you like it did me, he says, "You will do greater things than me." Can you imagine? How could a man like that say that to us? You'll do greater things than me. How about suicides? Did he stop suicides? How about alcoholism? You know, there was just as many drunks in his time that there is today. Alcoholism was around since alcohol began. It was way before Jesus' time that alcoholism came around. Now how about this fella? Mr. Bob, how do you say that? Bob W? Mike, is that how you do that? When you refer to the guy that created the AA program? Bill W. Did Jesus do that? No, he didn't do that. But that's an extremely successful program. And it shows us, in fact, that we have to be humble when we're in trouble and we got booze gripping us and we can't get away from it. There's only one way out, and that's call on the spirit world to help. In the AA program, they call it the higher power. How about suicides? Did he stop suicides? Not that we know of. But our good friend over here, Mike Williams from Cake, I hear wonderful things about him. Started the circle talk over there. Cake was plagued with suicides at one time. And I'm grateful for people like Mike. We haven't been hearing of any suicides coming out of Cake. Is that right, Mike? No, you don't have to knock on wood. What you're doing is correct. Don't pause for a minute. It's a wonderful thing. Did you know that our people did circle talks? All through indigenous cultures. When they had community problems, they got them together. And you had to bring it out. Everybody had to speak. When that talking stick went around the circle, you had to talk. And if your mind was clean things came out. But if you were mad at somebody, guess what came out? All that madness and that anger. And when it's brought out and the crying starts, people start to get well. So isn't that something? Jesus saw into the future and he says, you'll do greater things than me. But the truth of it is, when, like this story shows, when we call on the spirit world, we can do amazing things. And to recover our culture, bring back our clan systems, bring back our old ways, is totally realistic. What did the Old Testament say about old ways? We'll return to the old ways. So let's get into this. I'm going to just briefly make some additions to this, like Charlie Joseph did, and then work with me and we'll undo it, and you'll see some amazing things happen. Raven comes to the world, he sees the world in darkness, and he goes to the Nass River, and he talks with those people who are fishing Ooligan on that river. Ooligan, not hooligan. I make the mistake sometimes. But anyway, he says, where is the light? Where is the light? And they say, Nashak Ankau has a community house down the way, and the light is in there. And he's got a pretty daughter, who goes to the creek in the morning and drinks from the creek. So Raven thought about this for a while, so he turns himself into a speck of dirt. You didn't see that in this here. That's the first thing I got from Charlie's work. A speck of dirt, and he flows down the stream. And she picks him up, and before she drinks, Nashakan Cow says to his servants, look into the water. If there's any dirt there, he says, throw it out. Sure enough, here's Raven bouncing around in there in the form of a speck of dirt, and they throw him out. Raven regroups, he goes back up the creek, turns himself into, it used to be spruce needle, and David Katzek says, no, that's a hemlock needle. So I had to change my presentation a little bit. So as a hemlock needle, it's the same color as a ladle, and they looked in her, they couldn't see it. So accidentally she drinks it down, and she becomes pregnant with Raven. So anyway, she's about to have birth. For some reason, the birth didn't take place. This is another thing I learned from Charlie's, Joseph's work. And they lined, when Tlingits have children, in the old days, they'd dig a hole, and they would and line it with garments, and they would birth into that hole. And this particular time, they sensed there was somebody special coming, so they lined it with furs. And it went on for days, no birth. And finally, they called in a medicine woman. She looked, and she said, there's the problem right there. Take that fur out of there and put moss in that hole. And then the birth took place. So Raven's born as a little human boy, and he looks around, he grows real fast. Everybody's fascinated at his growth. And he sees the boxes, and he asks his grandfather one day, can I play with those boxes? And his grandfather says no. His mother says no. This went on for quite a while, and finally, he's frustrated, and he starts screaming and hollering, driving everybody nuts. And finally, his grandfather, loving him very much, says, let him play with the first box. So he plays and he plays and he plays with the box. That's another part that's not really in here. He plays and he plays and he plays with the box. And finally, when nobody's looking and he opens the box, out comes the stars. They go up through the smoke hole in the roof, and they've been in the sky ever since. What did the anthropologists call the story? The what story? Creation story. They actually think it's the creation story. And I'm not laughing at them, but it's interesting. Baha'u'llah said there's no beginning and there's no end. We've always been. And this is the thing that we're going to learn in the near future. Time is something you and I made up. And that's what we do here on earth. But you look in the old days, how did our old timers refer to history? What did they say? It happened when? Time immemorial, or long time ago. Even a year ago, long time ago. Didn't mean it. Time doesn't mean anything. That's how an artist is. Good artists, they lose concept of time. I presented to the artists at the celebration last night, and I told them what I felt about them. I said, you guys are amazing people. You take this great 16-foot piece of wood, and you work at it for months. And I said, I never could do that. There's no way I'm going to hack away on a piece of wood for 6 months. You know why? Because time means something different to me. I actually value time. I think time's important. So I don't have time for that. Simple as that. Those people, David Boxley is carving a little bit on the nose, the only one on the totem pole. He's chipping away on a little part of the nose, and I said to myself, my God, he'll never finish this thing. But time doesn't mean anything to him. Time is gone. Clarissa and all those fabulous artists, they lose track of time when they sit down and start working on their pieces. But a lot of us, time is so valuable. We run around the community acting like we're real busy, getting nothing done. So anyway, the next one is the other box, and we're all, Raven's playing with the box. And finally the moon comes out, and then the sun comes out, then he changes back into Raven. Like we see up here, some additions to the story that Charlie's work give to me. He goes back to the people on the river, the Nass River, and says, give me fish, I'll give you light. And they all get angry with him, and they say, you're not the boy with the light, you're not the boy with the light. And he repeated his request many times, and finally he lifts his right wing, and the moon is under there, and it shines out, and they go, oh, you are the boy with the light. You are the boy with the light. And then he takes the moon and he throws it down on the ground, and it smashes into the million pieces, and it spreads out through space. The people with the fur regalia go into the forest kingdom to live. The people with the fish regalia go into the ocean to live. And the people with the feathered regalia go into the bird kingdom to live. And it shows us how our people knew, in fact, that everything was their brothers. Everything was of the same spirit that they were. Our people knew that. Samson Harry told me one time, he says, even a halibut hook has a spirit in it. When we make that hook and we carve it, we put that design on it, that halibut hook has a spirit in it. Those days, they talked to everything. When they put a hook down in the water, they would actually talk to the hook and tell it what to do. Walter Soboleff told me when he was a young kid, the old-timers would talk to the buildings. They'd come up and they had the Tlingit design, and they would talk to the building. That's how our people were in the old days. Amazing, because they knew there was a spirit in that building. So anyway, let's go back to the beginning. When Raven came to the earth, and there was no light, there was just nothing but darkness. Let's imagine that for a minute. Could we live without the sun, you and I? If the sun didn't shine, could we exist down here? No, we could not exist. 2,000 degrees, something like that in space. We would crystallize and fall apart in a second. That's how cold it would be. So the story is a symbolic story or a literal story. It's a symbolic story, absolutely. So let's read it in symbols. Raven changes himself into a speck of dirt and puts himself in the water. What's the first thing you and I do with water in the morning? Help me out. What do? We take a shower, we clean up in the morning. So the message is telling us what? That we have to clean up. How about the baptism? When you go to be baptized and they dunk you backwards into the water, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You're making a commitment of what? To cleanse yourself of the things that are in your mind. What do? Did you know the southern natives have these little sweats? They go into the sweat, and the sweat teacher will tell you, don't pray for the community, don't pray for the world, pray for yourself. That's why we're sweating. We're sweating these poisons out of our system, and we pray for ourselves. And we see these things that are in us, and we try to get rid of them. How about if a holy man came to you again and said, let not your hearts be troubled? If you believed that, you thought that was good advice, what would you do? Let not your hearts be troubled. What that means is we'd have to take a look at our minds. Everything that got us upset, we would have to deal with it. We'd have to get rid of it. We'd have to change our thinking. John the Baptist, a lot of you remember the old movies that Hollywood used to make about John the Baptist? He was kind of a crazy guy, wear dirty robes and stuff like that. And he goes, what did he say? Repent, you sinners. Repent. What does repent mean? It means to change our thinking. And that's what the cleansing process is. We have to change our thinking. We got to get rid of that dirt and throw it out of our minds. Stop our gossiping. Stop talking about people as if they're separate from us. Stop criticizing. Stop passing judgment. Those kinds of things, our elders taught us not to do those things. And when they came up, they showed us what they were so we could deal with them. And we grew up strong. Another thing I was going to tell you, when the halls would fill up, every adult could speak. Now we see the elderly people getting quieter and quieter and quieter because a lot of us who are becoming elders didn't have the proper training. We didn't know how to be confident. We didn't go through the genealogy process. And we weren't taught how to respect people and what that actually means. You know, a lot of us talk about respect, but a lot of us don't know what that means. When we clean up our minds, it's a natural process. Nobody will have to tell us to be respectful to somebody else. We'll automatically be respectful to somebody else. So we have to learn and access that. Okay, he changed, the woman becomes pregnant. Now, is this woman in the story, was she married? So she must have been, hear it, I want to hear it loud. She must have been a virgin. How about that? Where have we heard that story before? She must have been a virgin. You know, the virgin story, Joseph Campbell, the famous mythologist, died about 1987, said that the virgin story comes from all over the world. I was at a conference in Hawaii, and an elderly woman, the first things came out of her mouth, she said, "We have the virgin story too." And if you look closely at this, we could call the box of daylight the virgin story, because that's an important issue in there. Now, tell me this, what does that mean, the virgin birth? Does that mean it's a worldly birth or a spiritual birth? It has to be a spiritual birth. So each of us can go through the virgin birth concept in life. Each of us. How about this? If Raven's over here and he turns into a spruce needle and then he is born over here, we could borrow a phrase from the Christians and say that he was born over here, born again. Absolutely, born again. And what that means is we've always been spiritual. But we come down here on earth, wander around, have fun, beat up on each other, have wars, have all kinds of fun down here, criticize each other, compete with each other, do all this stuff. Then finally one day we realize, wow, we're from a spiritual source. And then we start doing things spiritually. That means we're born again the way we always were. We just forgot it for a while. Then we get back on track, and we're moseying right along on the right path. So anyway, he's born to a virgin mother, and he asks for the boxes. And how about this? How does an infant communicate? Cries. An infant cries. Is it effective? Absolutely. Drive me nuts. Hey, get up. Go give the baby a bottle. Of course, that would be me. That wasn't my voice you heard. That was her voice you heard. Make the bottle and everything. And how about, isn't it interesting? We're the most intelligent beings on earth. How about a raven or a deer or a caribou? When they're born, how long does it take them to get up, suckle on their mother? How long does it take? Not even that, about 15, 20 minutes. Can you and I do that? Can we crawl to our mother's breast and drink on our own? So the baby is partially dependent or totally dependent? Which one? Totally dependent. Jesus says, come to us as a little child, not a child, but a little child, meaning be totally dependent on him, on the spirit world. Everything we need, if we want to recover our culture, if we want to solve family problems, we turn to the spirit world, and the spirit world will what? Answer. Feed you, right. There you go. Yeah, right. Okay, now let me tell you how powerful. Let's show ourselves how powerful truth is. Now, 1 million years ago, how did a baby communicate? Absolutely. 1 million years from now, how will a baby communicate? And that's showing us that truth is the only thing that never changes. You and I change, but truth always has been truth and always will be truth. It never changes. So when we start to get onto it, it becomes a powerful thing in our life, and we start to fall together, and we become the people and the beings that we're supposed to be. So how about this? Raven plays and plays and plays with the box. Now you and I, when we were little kids, we went out to play, and we wanted to experience the feeling of what? We wanted to be, absolutely. We wanted to be happy. How about this? If you and I are the ones who are little kids, and I hurt one of you, but we've been having a lot of fun up till then, and all of a sudden we're split up, we don't want to play with each other anymore, and we complain when we go home about Walter, he's a mean, he hit me, and so on, or else he took my toy and broke it. We can name a bunch of things. And anyway, that lasts for a while, and then you think to yourself, golly, I sure miss Walter. We had a lot of fun. What would you have to do to get back to Walter and start playing again? In your mind, what would you have to do? Huh? Absolutely. You'd have to forgive me. And you come back. In the story it says, plays and plays and plays with the box. Now Jesus said, forgive 7 times, and 7 times that, and 7 times that. Forgiveness is a practice. We have to do it every day. Once we give on to forgiveness, you'll be amazed how unforgiving you are. I'm going through that experience right now. It amazes me how many things that I complain and bitch about in the world. How many things that I don't like about other people. So the forgiveness process is starting to come on to me, and it's an amazing thing. Some people are gifted with it. They're born with good forgiveness. They're doing a study. It was in a magazine called Newsweek a few years ago called God and Health. Did anybody ever see that? Amazing stuff they came up with in there. They did a study on forgiving people and non-forgiving people. Who were the sickest of the two? Absolutely. If we don't know how to forgive, it affects our wellness. And they're starting to discover that the body doesn't decide to get sick. We actually think that. We run around and say, oh, there's a cold going around. Oh, somebody's got the flu. We're going to get the flu. We're going to get a cold. And we actually believe that. How about this? If any of you are biblical scholars, how many times did you read the word imagination in the Bible? Has anybody ever seen it there? It's actually all over the place, but it's not called imagination. It's not pronounced imagination. There's 2 words that Jesus used instead of imagination, and that's faith and believe. And we're starting to see. How many of you seen the DVD called The Secret? It's not really a secret. They actually took the information out of the Bible and out of different cultures and use it. Here's how it goes. There's 3 main issues to it. One is asking, one is believing, and one is receiving. And it actually instructs us how to use that. And that's why they call it The Secret. And they use all kinds of famous people in the world, and they give quotes from them and how they use the formula of what they call the secret. But it really isn't the secret. The quote I mentioned earlier, what do you pray for and believe you receive? Now let's use that. Let's change that word belief. Let me ask you this first. All of us have grown up with a hypochondriac. What is a hypochondriac? What does he or she do? Okay, let's use another word. What is it? What's the word I said is not in the Bible? They imagine themselves to be sick. Oh, I'm hurting. Oh, I got a headache today. I got to go see the doctor. You know, we see every community has a hypochondriac, maybe several of them. How about this? How about the people don't get sick? You've met those too. I never get sick. And they have an imagination too. And they say things like, when there's a cold in a community or there's a flu, and I feel it coming on, I say to myself, I'm not going to get sick. And they imagine themselves being powerful enough not to receive that sickness. Guess what? It's mind over matter. Their body follows their thought patterns. And we're starting to discover now that, in fact, how about these simple experiments they're doing? Okay, they're doing these experiments. They'll take 50 people and they'll split them up, 25 over here and 25 over here, and they'll bring in a group like you, and they say, you all pray, but just pray for these people over here. Well, guess who gets well first? The ones that are being prayed for. Now here, look at this. How much of this is in our bodies? Yeah, 78.5%. Is that what you said? 78.5%? Yeah. Anyway, it's right up there. We're mostly water. So when we pray, our thought lets out this vibration that goes all through the universe, and the specific person that we're praying for picks this up, and the thought patterns change the molecular structure in the body so they get well. It's being proven all the time. How about the word nashak ankawu? I worked with Anna Katzik and others on this, and I heard a lot. Anka, the ankau means several things. Can mean God or the one above us. And that's the first one I heard was the one above us. Shak meaning the jewels and treasures of life. And Nas, in particular time I was working with in Yakutat, I couldn't find a person that could deal with it. So I went into the Jewish culture to find it. To make a long story short, I found a word there that's pronounced nes, and it means miracle. So when we pray for somebody and we see the results, we say, it's a miracle. It shows that actual praying works. But now we're starting to see the science of it. If you get a chance, pick up a book called Messages in Water. Japanese taking pictures of a crystallizing frozen water and polluted water. This could be polluted. And when he takes a picture, it'll show up and it'll be dark brown and all kinds of colors. But it tastes pretty good to me. I need the water up here. So anyway, how about this type of forgiveness? There's different levels of forgiveness. I want to share this with you before that we part and get into the question and answers. If I offend you here today, we got 2 more days of the conference going, and I offend you terribly, you'll have a perception of me, and when we're walking towards each other out in the hallway, you'll say, oh God, here comes that Walter. I'm going to walk over this way a little bit so he can go that way a little bit. And you'll avoid me for a while. And you'll have this perception of when finally you decide, geez, I really did enjoy Walter, just like when we were kids, and say, golly, I'm going to forgive Walter for what he said to me. Now tell me this. Now, be real careful with this one. Did you forgive Walter, or did you forgive your perception of Walter? Which one is it? Yes. Isn't that interesting? That's a new approach on forgiveness. It can only be in our own minds. We can say that it never really happened. We're the ones that got upset. We decided to get upset when we saw what we did or heard what we heard. It's our own minds that get us upset. It's our own minds after that gets us sick if we harbor those kinds of thoughts. So we're starting to see the science of wellness, the science of getting better.
Is that the same word as I'm sorry?
That's a good way to do it. Penance is a very powerful thing, and I say it many times because I'm screwing up many times. I must confess, you're the only people I've confessed to, I must admit.
I found it real easy to even not have to forgive after I read the Full Armor of God, where it says, that's Paul's letter to the Ephesians, where he says that our struggles are not with flesh and blood, but with the powers of the dark world. And so I was going through a lot, and people were, you mentioned first about gossip, how it hurts and kills, and I knew there was lots of that going on, but I found it easier to live with it because I knew this struggle of ours was not with those people.
What she said was that it's in Paul's letter, in his writings, that it's not with flesh and blood that the power of sickness is and the power of problems. It really is of the mind and of the dark world. The dark world that you and I know, we call it the ego. Let's simplify it. It's not out there. There never was a devil in our mythology. You can't find it. And you can't find Satan or all the different things that we've made up to blame others on. We take full responsibility for everything we do. Now, just briefly, I want to say a couple of things before I ask for questions. The woman marrying the bear story is the Adam and Eve story. You'll see the blaming thing in there. God comes on and saying, what have you done, Adam? And does he take responsibility? No. Eve made me do it. Woman marrying the bear story, she runs down the trail, slips in bear dung, gets bear dung all over her, and she gets up and she starts to cuss somebody out. Who is she cussing out? The bear. Blames the bear. So let's all take responsibility for everything happens. Even if our daughter is raped and killed, we know that we've got to go through that experience. There's nothing going to stop that. We have certain things that we're going to go through, and if we take responsibility for it, we release the anguish and the pain much quicker when we take responsibility of life. Now, the last one about the box of daylight before I take the first question. When the stars, moon, and the sun, where do they come from? Without the box or within the box? They come from within the box. Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven's within. And normally I'd have you do this, but I'm going to speed the process because we're running out of time. The first one's the stars. When you and I are out there hunting and we forget about time and it gets dark, how are we going to get home? We're going to look at the stars and get to what from the stars? Direction and guidance. That's the first thing that comes out. How did the three kings find Jesus? Stars. See, our stories are the same. And how about this? If you and I could look at the stars, moon, and the sun in the sky, we're looking at the whole universe. So when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven's within, everything there is, everything that God is in us. There is nothing left out. He ain't out there, he's right here. And Jesus was trying to show us that. And the raven story tells us the same thing. That's why they come out of the boxes. So anyway, let's go into a question period. And I know we don't have much time, so let's go. We've got 10 minutes. I'm on a committee, and we all said, boy, we're going to stick to our guns. We're not going to run over anybody's time. So is there a question? Dolly, I couldn't have told you everything. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
How did the man obtain the moon, the sun, and the stars?
How does he obtain it?
How did he have that in his possession?
Jesus says it's always there. It's always in us. It never was any different. That's why I say there's no time. You and I made up time. The kingdom of heaven's always been with us. We were born with it. Each time we come in, we've been alive thousands and thousands of times, in and out of life. And it's always been there. But remember, we're over at the soda stand playing around here on earth. That's why we forget that we're there. Anything else? Yes? I'm sorry I interrupted you the last time.
Yeah, can we learn from, we can learn from hardships. And I always wonder why people listen to only one side of the story.
She says we can learn from hardships, and she wonders why we only listen to one side of the story. Jesus says, wear my yoke, my burden is light. You know what that means? If we call on him, it actually makes it easy. We can actually endure many hardships in a very lightened state. He says, let not your hearts be troubled. Now, many of us are troubled that we're losing our culture. Did he say that? He says, if you lose your culture, it's okay to be upset about it. He said, no, let not your hearts be troubled. And then he says, if you want that back, all you have to do is ask me, and you'll get it back. And how to do that? This is a new way. It says that in the secret. Write down what you want. If you're having problems with your children, say, I want those problems to stop. I want to understand. I want the right words to speak. When we get on to this sort of stuff, our voices start to change. And all of a sudden, we know how to talk to our children. Many of us, I didn't grow up with the parents. So my children were terrible. Boozing and drugs and jail and everything. And I go, what? Why did I deserve this? The reason why I deserve it is because I never learned anything from anybody. But this story is telling us that, in fact, we can have access to anything. And maybe I should just do the one about the moon. Walter Soboloff sent me a little packet. Remember that? Many of you got those little things from him, little Christian things. And one of them, it says, the last thing Jesus says, I go now, and I leave you the Holy Spirit. But he won't guide you by his own intuition. He'll be guided by me. Now listen, when we got in the moonlight, can we see what's out there in the moonlight? It's still dark outside, but can we understand what we see? Absolutely. When the Holy Spirit touches us, all of a sudden, we start to understand life. We start to understand who we are. We start to understand what our purpose is here on earth. And I guarantee you, when you get onto it, you'll find your mission. You're not only going on the right path, but a whole bunch of people come with you, and they go with you. Because you're saying the right thing, because you're letting the Holy Spirit speak through you. your voice will change anymore. That's over here.
Yes, you've touched on a lot of things meant, oh,
I'm sorry, right over here.
go ahead.
Okay. So you're saying that religion and spirituality are like cross culture and is absolutely
The same.
compatible?
Absolutely. She's asked if our religion and spirituality are cross culture, and absolutely, they're all the same. There's, no matter where you go in the world, truth will be there. Every culture will show you its truth, and you'll say, hey, Walter Porter said that too. Or my elder said that too. It's the same everywhere. All of us have the same stories, the same knowledge, the same wisdom. It's no different, and like I said before, it never changes. You had a question too.
Yes, I was wondering, I know there's a lot of people that went through this, but I always never understood what is life after death. Is there explanation for that?
You know, I'm not so sure that we need to understand that. She says, what is life after death? And I'm not so sure that we need to ask that question. What we need to do now is pay attention and learn through spiritual means how to love one another, and those questions will be answered. Remember that phrase, a lot of people, God works in mysterious ways. I guarantee you, when we start getting into this, the mystery of life disappears. There's no such thing as God in mysterious ways. We'll understand it all someday. We'll all be like Jesus someday. We'll all have our own galaxy to be in charge of someday. You know that big Hubble telescope out there? What does it do? They look zillions of light years way out there. What do they see out there? Yeah, they see a bunch of other galaxies and other universes out there. And if they change it over here, or if you go way out there with that same telescope and look there out farther, will you see a wall there? No. Other galaxies. In that part where the raven throws down and it breaks into a million pieces and goes out in the universe, that shows us, in fact, as we become to the state of where Jesus is, not only are we enlightened, but we take lots and lots of people with us. That's what it's telling us. You've been a wonderful audience. Mike, go ahead. You're the last one.
My name is Mike Jackson. I have a real good friend, Mike Williams, and we're always mistaken.
Yeah.
I still need to take that trip on Iditarod like he does.
Yeah.
But there was this question about life after death. I believe it because I'm Tlingit, Haida, Pegani. Einstein, it's a theory of relativity. He never saw an atom. It's a theory. But all scientists believe it because I am one. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry and engineering. I got to meet Linus Pauling, the guy that discovered DNA, but it's just a theory, the twisting. You talk about our people being spiritual. The way it was explained to me, to be calm with ourselves, to find ourselves in Him. In Him, there's one number, one, the big man, the big spirit, the big God, the Kian Kau, or in Haida, Salana. We have two of everything. We have 4 directions, 4 winds, and we have 8 lunar phases. We have 13 original quants. There was a saying, when I die, I will see Him. We only believe in Him. But the part is, the only time that I'm really going to live is when I see Him. But I'll have to die to do that. My father explained to me was that we're just a spiritual being in this shell going through the big handling of whatever you want to call it, the universe. But we'll just change the shape because like this man, Shawan, I call him Grandpa because that's my great-grandpa's name, Shawan. But we call him our grandchildren, but he could call me that. We're just going through this reincarnation until we get it right, then we move on. But where do we go? Did we ever see the Almighty? No. Did Einstein ever see an atom? No. But we know we're all made of that same element. But living and sharing to feel whole, once you do that, you'll move on to another one. We call it passing on, going into the forest to be guarded by Take-Away-D people, Bear people, until the forgiveness of our selfishness, our missing them, our grieving, will let them go. So we know that there's another place. The memorial songs, the spirit bowls, the burning of the food, we know how to do those things to guide them in a good way. But there we can call upon them again, huh? Mm-hmm. Changing of the water, mm-hmm. to be with us, to be around us, mm-hmm. to guide us in a good way again. Mm-hmm. But I know it's calming to know that we'll see them. We're not going to be in this shape with that atom making us up. We're going to be with them. Who knows where we go? The Hubble telescope. You're seeing the past when you see the stars. That happened millions of years ago. It took millions of years that light to come to us. It's something else is already happening out there. We don't know. But we have faith in the big one, in the man, in the woman. So it's calming to me to know where I'm going, because I know who I am. And that's what we'd like to do with him. So he'd be calm as he grows up, to be good to his children.
Good, thank you, Mike. You know, it reminds me when he says that, he can be slightly different in his thinking about it. And always pray when you hear somebody. Pray about whether that's true or not. Don't just sit back and say, yeah, wow, what I'm impressed with what Walter said or what Mike said. Pray about it. Ask, make sure that you cover it. And then when you end a prayer, always say, if you're asking for something, if it's meant to be. Because the power of the universe is in every one of us, and if we misuse it, it could be very damaging to us, our family, and our communities, in the world. So always question what people has. Remember, he says, ask and ye shall receive. We can say, what Walter said, is that correct? Don't be afraid to do that. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much for coming.